The land was the first thing and the last. It stretched from one end of the sky to the other, a great dry ocean of rust-colored rock and pale grass. This was the year 1872, and the American West was a wound, open and raw, a place of savage beauty and quick death. The railroads were coming, thin iron lines of progress that cut the prairies like a knife. And with them came the miners, the soldiers, the settlers. They came in a flood, and where they walked, the old world bled. Here, on the high plains, the air was thin and clean, and the war between the New World and the Old was fought not in grand battles, but in small, bitter skirmishes, in burned-out lodges and stolen horses, in shallow graves beside dry creek beds. Jacob moved through this land like a spirit. He was a warrior, a Dine, a man of the Navajo people. He carried a rifle, its wooden stock smooth and dark from the oils of his hands. He was trekking, his eyes dark and sharp, missed nothing. He saw the broken stem of a yucca plant, the unnaturally straight edge of a boot print in the sand, the faint, acrid smell of tin tobacco on the wind. These were the signs of soldiers, blue coats, the men who had pushed his people from their canyons, who had marched them to the place of suffering, Bosque Redondo. They were back now, or some had never left. But the land was not the same. The trust was gone. On his left forearm, a long, puckered scar shone white against his brown skin. It was an old wound, a gift from a cavalry saber, a reminder of a fight he had almost lost. That wound had taught him. It had burned away his last flicker of faith in treaties, in talk, in the white man's paper promises. His world had become very simple. He would protect this land, his home. He would survive. He would live free, or he would die. And these soldiers, these men he hunted, they were a threat to that freedom. They had invaded his ancestral lands, and he would make them leave. He was not a young man, but he was strong. His body was lean, hard rock and muscle, tuned to the harsh rhythms of the desert. He had seen too much, lost too much. He had no wife, no children. They had been taken by the coughing sickness the white men brought. All he had was the land, and the anger, a cold, clean anger that kept him sharp. He moved with a silent, deadly purpose, his focus absolute. He was close. He could feel it. The soldiers were careless. They thought this land was empty. They were wrong. Miles away, in a shallow ravine choked with rabbit brush, Alice Harrison wondered if she was already dead. She was 26 years old, and she had never known true misery until now. Not the misery of a tight corset, or a cruel word at a cotillion, or the suffocating weight of her father's expectations. This was a misery of the body, a primal suffering. Her tongue was a dry piece of leather in her mouth. Her stomach was a hollow, aching void. Her feet, inside her fine Boston boots, were a mess of raw blisters. She had run 3 days ago. She had slipped away from the wagon train in the dark, taking only a small satchel and a canteen of water. The water was long gone. The satchel, containing a change of clothes and a book of poetry, she had abandoned yesterday. She had run from her family, the prominent Harrisons of Philadelphia, who had arranged her life like a business merger. She was to be married to a mining baron in California, a man she had never seen, a man whose letters were cold and possessive. Her father had called it a sensible match. Her mother had called it her duty. Alice had called it a cage. So she had fled. She had used the money her grandmother had secretly left her, bought passage west, believing in the stories of open spaces, of new beginnings. She had believed she could disappear and remake herself, perhaps as a schoolteacher or a seamstress, anything but a wife to a man she didn't know. She was a tough woman. Her spirit was strong, but it was also wounded, bruised by a lifetime of being told what to think, who to be. She had a will of iron, but she had no knowledge of the wilderness. The West she had found was not a romantic painting. It was a vast, indifferent emptiness. The sky was too big. The sun was a hammer, and she was lost, utterly, terrifyingly lost. She had tried to follow the North Star, tried to find a river, tried to do all the things she had read about in books. But the books had not prepared her for the scale of it, for the silence that was not silent at all, but filled with the rustle of unseen things, the cry of hawks, the howl of coyotes at night. She had been trying to find a settlement, any small town or fort where she could gather herself and make a new plan. But the world was just rocks and scrub and endless, rolling hills. She stumbled on a loose rock, her ankle turning with a sickening crack of pain. Alice cried out, a thin, sharp sound of pure agony, and collapsed onto the dusty ground. She lay there, tears of frustration and pain cutting clean lines through the dirt on her new. She was a fool. She had run from a velvet prison only to die alone in a desert. Jacob heard the cry. It was not an animal. It was human. It was weak. He stopped, his body instantly alert. The soldiers. Was it a trap? He listened. The sound was not repeated, but it had come from the ravine to his left. The soldiers were straight ahead. This was a distraction. He cursed silently. A distraction could be deadly. He could not ignore it. A wounded person. A trap. A child. He didn't know, but he had to know. He left the trail of the soldiers, his moccasins making no sound on the stones. He moved up the side of the ravine, keeping to the cover of the low juniper trees. He peered over the edge. He saw her. A white woman. Her hair was the color of summer hay, undone and matted with dirt. Her clothes were strange. A dark blue skirt torn and ruined. A white blouse stained with sweat and blood from her fall. She was clutching her ankle, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He watched her for a full minute. He saw the fine material of her clothes, the softness of her hands, now scratched and bleeding. She was not from here. She was one of the new ones, the ones who came and did not understand the land. She was alone. He scanned the area around her. No horses, no tracks but her own, clumsy and erratic. She was not a trap. She was just lost. He felt a surge of impatience. He was hunting. He had no time for this. She was a problem, a white problem. He should leave her, let the sun or the wolves take her. It was not his concern. He started to back away, to return to his true purpose. But he paused. He looked at her again. He saw the lines of desperation around her mouth, the raw sunburn on her cheeks. She was prey. And he was a hunter, but he did not hunt women. He made a small sound, a deliberate scuff of his foot on the gravel. Alice Harrison's head snapped up. Her terror was so great. It was almost paralyzing. The man was simply there, standing on the rim of the ravine, not 20 yards away. He was tall, his skin the color of the earth, his black hair pulled back from a face that was all hard angles and shadows. He wore leggings of soft deerskin and a simple cloth shirt. He held a long rifle in his hands, held it easily, like it was a part of him, but it was his eyes that held her. They were dark as the night sky, and they looked at her with no expression at all. Not pity, not anger, not curiosity, just nothing. She scrambled backward, pushing herself with her hands, the pain in her ankle forgotten, replaced by a new, sharper fear. "No," she whispered. "Please." The stories, the half-true, half-imagined tales the settlers told around the fire, filled her head. A savage, an Indian. Jacob watched her panic. It was a familiar, ugly thing. He didn't move. He didn't raise his rifle. He just stood, a figure of stone against the blue sky. He saw her fear, and it bored him. He was not a monster from her storybooks. He was a man whose home was being stolen. He felt the scar on his arm itch. He had seen this woman's kind before, the women who came with the soldiers and the miners, the ones who looked at his people as if they were animals. He had no time for this. He should go. The soldiers were getting away, but he remained. Something in her, the sheer, idiotic fact of her being here, held him. She was like a bird with a broken wing, a bird that had no place in this desert. Alice finally found her voice. It was a dry, cracking sound. "Please, do not hurt me. I am lost." She stopped. The words sounded stupid. He probably did not even speak English. She was going to die here, at the hands of this man. After all she had done to be free. Jacob looked at her, his expression unchanging. Then he spoke. His voice was low and rough, like stones grinding together. "Lost," he said the English word perfectly. "You are on Dinetta, the land of the people. You are all lost." The sound of his voice, the perfect, unaccented English, was more shocking than the rifle. It shattered her image of him. He was not a simple, wild creature. He was a man who was judging her. I did not mean to be," she stammered, trying to pull herself upright, trying to find some shred of the Harrison dignity. "I am trying to find a settlement, a town, or Fort Defiance." At the name, a flicker of something moved in his dark eyes. It was a cold, hard light. "Fort Defiance," he repeated, and the name sounded like a curse. "That is where the soldiers live, the blue coats." He looked away from her, toward the north. "I hunt soldiers." Alice's blood ran cold. She was trapped. She was between this warrior who hunted soldiers and the soldiers themselves. She had been heading toward the fort as a landmark, a place of safety. Now she saw it as a target. They are near here?" she asked, her mind racing. Jacob looked back at her. His gaze dropped to the ground around her, to the scuffed rocks, the broken plants. "You make much noise," he said, "like a wounded calf. They would find you, or the wolf, or the sun will find you." He saw the blisters on her face, the deep cracks in her lips. He turned his head, looking north again. He had lost the trail. He had lost time, because of this woman. He looked back at her. She was watching him, her blue eyes wide. The terror was still there, but beneath it, he saw something else. A flicker of intelligence, of assessment. She was not just a weak, crying thing. She was wounded. Yes, but the outline said she was tough. He saw it now, in the set of her jaw, in the way she held herself despite the pain. "You cannot stay here," he said. It was not a threat. It was a simple statement of fact. Will you help me?" The words felt like ashes in her mouth. Alice Harrison, who had never asked anyone for anything she could not buy or demand, was now begging for her life from a man who hated her people. Jacob looked at the sky. The sun was high and brutal. He had a choice. He could follow his anger, his duty, and hunt the soldiers, or he could deal with this woman, this piece of the white world that had washed up, broken at his feet. He had lost his faith in their society, in their God, in their laws. He lived by his own code now. Survive. Protect the land. And this woman, as much as he hated it, was now on his land. To leave her was to kill her. He was a warrior. He was not an executioner of lost, foolish women. He grunted, a sound of deep frustration. He turned his back to her, a clear dismissal. "Come," he said, his voice flat. "You walk. You make no sound." He started to walk, not north toward the soldiers, but west, up the side of the ravine and toward the high, rocky mesas that shimmered in the heat. Alice stared at his back. He was leaving her. No, he had said come. He was walking slowly, but he was not looking back. He expected her to follow. She pushed herself to her feet, biting back a scream as her full weight settled on her injured ankle. Black spots danced in front of her eyes. She balanced for a moment, breathing hard. The man did not stop. She took one step, then another. Each one was a fresh agony. She was a proper lady from Philadelphia, a woman of society and education, and she was now hobbling through the desert after a Navajo warrior, a man who hunted soldiers, a man who was her only hope. She had run from one life, and now she was a prisoner of a new one, a life she could not possibly understand. She was more lost and more afraid than she had ever been. They walked for what felt like a lifetime. Alice measured the time in increments of pain. Each step on her ruined ankle was a fresh blaze, a fire that shot up her leg and into her spine. The man, Jacob, did not look back, not once. He moved with a long, ground-eating stride, his moccasins silent on the rock. He was a part of the landscape, a brown figure moving through a brown world. She was a wound upon it, a broken piece of another place, loud, clumsy, and pale. She wanted to call out. She wanted to beg him to slow down, to rest, to give her one moment of peace. But she held the words in. She saw the set of his shoulders, the rifle held in the crook of his arm. He was not a man one begged. He was a man one obeyed, or one died. She bit her lip until she tasted the salt of her own blood. She would not be weak. She was a Harrison, and while she despised what that name meant, it had given her a spine of iron. She would walk until she fell. And she did fall. Her ankle turned on a loose stone, the last of her strength gone. She went down in a heap of torn skirting and dust. She did not make a sound, but the man stopped. He had heard the change in her breathing, the small scrape of boot leather against gravel. He turned. He stood over her. His face was impossible to read. It held no pity. It held only impatience. He said 2 words. "Get up." She pushed herself up on her hands. "I cannot. My ankle. It is broken. I think." He looked at her, his gaze flat. Then he looked at the sky. He was listening. He was sensing things she could not. He bent, and before she could protest, he had grabbed her upper arm and hauled her to her feet. The motion was not gentle. It was efficient. He pulled her arm over his shoulders. He took her weight. He was like stone, solid and unyielding. He said, "We move now." They walked like that, a grotesque 3-legged creature, her hobbling, him dragging. The sun beat on them. She could feel the heat of his body through his shirt. It smelled of dust and sweat and something clean, like pine. It was the most intimate she had ever been with a man, and it was a moment of pure, agonizing survival. They were moving toward a line of shattered red rock, a place that looked like a giant had torn the world apart. Jacob suddenly froze. He pushed her, hard, against a flat wall of stone. He put his hand over her mouth. His eyes were not flat now. They were alive. They were dangerous. He whispered, his voice a dry rasp against her ear. "Do not move. Do not breathe." He pulled a low-hanging juniper branch in front of them, a flimsy screen of green, and Alice heard it, the jingle of a harness, the clop of iron-shod hooves on rock, the low murmur of men's voices. White men. 5 of them appeared. They wore the dusty blue of the United States Cavalry. They were the men Jacob had been hunting. They were the men she had been searching for. Soldiers, salvation. They rode slowly, their rifles resting across their saddles. They looked tired and hot and angry. Their leader, a sergeant with a face like worn leather and a thick mustache, spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the ground. One of the younger soldiers, a corporal with pale, nervous eyes, stopped his horse. He pointed. "Sergeant, look there!" He was not pointing at them. He was pointing at the ground, at the tracks, the messy, deep print of her boot beside the light print of Jacob's moccasin. The sergeant dismounted. He studied the ground. 1 shot, 1 knot, and a drag mark. He looked up, his eyes scanning the rocks. He drew his pistol. Jacob's body was a coiled spring beside her. She could feel the muscles in his back tense. He was ready to fight. 5 of them. He was one, and he had her. "Come on out," the sergeant called. His voice was rough. "We know you are in there." Jacob did not move. Alice's heart was a hammer against her ribs. She was hidden, but her dress, her pale skin, she was a beacon in this landscape. The nervous corporal saw her. He saw a flash of her blue skirt through the juniper. He raised his rifle. "Sergeant, there." Jacob pushed her out into the open. His hands were raised, but only halfway. He kept his body between her and the soldiers. The sergeant's eyes went from Jacob to Alice. He saw the warrior, dark and hostile. He saw the woman, white, disheveled, terrified. His face hardened. He assumed the worst. "Well now," the sergeant said, walking forward. "What do we have here? Ma'am, are you all right? Did this savage harm you?" Alice found her voice. It was cracked. No, I was lost. He found me. He was helping me." The sergeant looked at Jacob. He sneered. "Helping you? That is a new one." He looked back at Alice, his eyes taking in her torn clothes, her matted hair. His gaze lingered. Then his eyes widened. He squinted. "Wait a moment." He stepped closer. He had a piece of paper in his hand. Pulled from his pocket, he unfolded it. It was a telegraph flimsy. He read it, then looked hard at her face. "By God, you are her! You are the Harrison woman! Alice Harrison, from Philadelphia." Alice felt the world drop away. The vast, open West, her dream of freedom, all of it collapsed into this single, terrible moment. Her father's reach was endless. He had sent telegraphs. He had put the army to work, looking for his runaway daughter as if she were a stolen piece of property. The sergeant smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was a smile of profit. "There is a reward, ma'am. A very large one. From your father. We are to escort you to the settlement at Green River. You have caused a great deal of trouble." He turned to his men. "Corporal, take her. Get her on a horse. Be gentle. She is worth a lot of money." The corporal moved forward. Alice flinched. The sergeant looked at Jacob. "And you," he spat again. "We will take you too, renegade." Probably the one who led her astray. "Tie his hands." Two soldiers dismounted. They grabbed Jacob. He did not resist. He let his arms be pulled behind his back. He let them tie his wrists with a leather thong. But his eyes, his dark eyes, never left the sergeant. They were not the eyes of a prisoner. They were the eyes of a wolf, waiting. "They do not understand," Alice said, her voice rising with panic. "He saved me. I was hurt. He was taking me to safety." The sergeant patted her shoulder, a heavy, condescending gesture. "Of course he was. Ma'am, do not you worry your pretty head. We will take it from here. You are safe now, back with your own kind." Her own kind. The words echoed in her mind. These men, with their hard eyes and their easy cruelty. The man they were taking her back to, the cold baron from California. Her father, who saw her as a bargaining chip. These were her people. They put her on a horse. The pain in her ankle was nothing compared to the cold dread in her stomach. She had run from a cage, and the cage had sent its keepers to find her. They started to move. Alice on her horse, Jacob walking, his hands bound. The soldiers were relaxed now. They had their prize. They were talking about the reward money, about the whiskey they would buy. Jacob walked without complaint. He kept his eyes on the path, but Alice saw him. He was not defeated. He was watching. He watched the way the sergeant's pistol sat low on his hip. He watched the nervous corporal, who kept looking back, as if afraid. He watched the rocks they were moving through, a narrow canyon with high walls. Alice knew this place. They had just come from here. Jacob had been leading her through it. He knew this land. The sergeant was riding beside her. "Your father must be a very important man, ma'am, to have the army looking for his daughter." Alice did not answer. She was watching Jacob. He stumbled, or he pretended to. He fell toward the corporal's horse. The soldier shouted. Jacob moved like a snake. His bound hands shot up. He grabbed the corporal's rifle from its scabbard. He swung it, a heavy arc of wood and steel, striking the sergeant in the chest. The man flew from his saddle. It was pure, sudden chaos. A soldier yelled. Jacob dropped the rifle. He threw his body at the sergeant on the ground. He was not reaching for a weapon. He was reaching for the knife on the sergeant's belt. He got it. In one smooth motion, he rolled, cut the leather thong on his wrists, and was on his feet. The nervous corporal was aiming his pistol, his hand shaking. Jacob threw the knife. It crossed the 10 feet between them in a silver flash. The corporal made a small, surprised sound and fell. Jacob did not pause. He lunged for the corporal's horse, the one he had been walking beside. He vaulted onto its back. 2 shots rang out, bullets smacking the rock where he had been. He kicked the horse, not away, but toward her. Alice screamed. He did not stop. He rode straight at her. He grabbed her arm, his grip a band of iron. He pulled her clean off her horse and onto his, in front of him. The force of it almost broke her. She landed hard against his chest, the air driven from her lungs. He shouted. It was not English. It was a yell, a deep, guttural cry that sounded like the canyon itself given a voice. He kicked the horse again. A soldier was reloading. Another was trying to aim from his panicked horse. Jacob was not riding down the canyon, the way they had come. He was riding up the canyon wall, guiding the horse on a narrow, impossible track that was nothing more than a goat path. Alice clung to him. She buried her face against his shoulder. She could smell the gun smoke, the sweat, the horse. She could feel the hard, lean power of his body as he guided the animal. Bullets whined past them. She heard the soldiers shouting, cursing, far below. He rode for what seemed like an eternity. The horse scrambled, its lungs heaving. Jacob seemed to know every stone, every turn. He rode until the sounds of the pursuit were gone, lost in the maze of red rock. He finally stopped. They were in a place that could not be seen from below. A small, hidden cleft in the rock, barely wide enough for the horse. In front of them was a structure, a low, round building made of mud and logs. It blended so perfectly with the earth. She had not seen it until they were upon it. Jacob slid from the horse. His body was tense. He was listening. He pulled her down. She fell, her ankle collapsing. She lay on the red dust, gasping. He tied the horse, a stolen army horse, to a ring of rock. He looked at her. His chest was heaving. There was a scratch on his cheek where a bullet had grazed him. He went into the small hut. He was inside for a moment. He came back out with a water skin. He tossed it at her. It landed in her lap. She drank. The water was cool and tasted of minerals. It was life. She looked at him. He was checking the stolen horse, running his hands over its legs. He was calm, as if he had not just attacked 5 soldiers and stolen her. Where are we?" she managed to ask. He did not look at her. He spoke to the horse, soothing it in his own language. Then he looked at her. His eyes were dark. A safe place, my place. He looked at her, his gaze finally settling on her, hard and assessing. The soldiers will look, they will ride, they will curse, but they will not find this place. This is Denada, the land of the people. You are not safe with them. You are not safe with me, but you will stay here. He turned and went back inside the hogan, leaving her alone in the slice of shade. Alice pulled herself to a sitting position, her back against the warm rock. She looked at her hands, scratched and dirty. She was trapped. She knew it. She had just seen the man who was her only protector kill, or badly wound, one of her own people. She had just been rescued from her rescuers. She was caught between 2 worlds. One was the world of her father, of soldiers and rewards, of civilized arrangements and cold, loveless marriages. It was a world she had risked her life to escape. The other world was this rock, this sun, this silent, violent man. A world she did not understand, a world that terrified her. She looked at the dark opening of the hogan. She was entirely dependent on him, her captor, her savior. The thought was a cold knot in her stomach. She had no one else. She had to trust him. And she was more afraid of that than she had been of anything in her entire life. The sun bled out of the sky, leaving a bruise of purple and cold gray. Alice sat with her back against the rock wall until the warmth of the stone was gone, replaced by a deep, penetrating chill. The pain in her ankle was a dull, heavy throb. She was alone. The horse, a United States Army animal, stamped its foot, nervous in the new, strange place. The man, Jacob, was inside the dark opening of the small, mud house. He had not spoken again. She was a prisoner. She had been rescued from the soldiers only to be captured by this man. She was property to be returned, a reward to be claimed. Now she was something else, a burden, a witness. She did not know what she was. The cold became unbearable. It sank into her bones. She pulled the torn remnants of her skirt around her legs, shivering. She had survived the sun, but the night, she thought, would kill her. He appeared in the doorway, a dark shape against the even darker interior. He said she must come inside. The night was not for sitting. She tried to stand, but her ankle gave way immediately. She gasped, stifling a cry. He was beside her in 2 strides. He did not offer a hand. He bent, put one arm behind her back and one under her knees, and lifted her. He did it as if she weighed nothing, as if she were a sack of corn. The motion was so sudden, so impersonal. She did not have time to protest. He carried her inside. The inside of the hogan was one round room. It smelled of earth and smoke and wool. It was dark, but her eyes adjusted to see a low, cold fire pit in the center. Piles of sheepskins lay against one wall. A few pots and skin bags hung from the curved wooden supports. It was the home of a man who lived alone. He placed her on a pile of the sheepskins. They were thick and soft, surprisingly clean. He moved to the center of the room and knelt. He began to build a fire, using small, dry sticks that seemed to appear from nowhere. He worked with an economy of motion. He used no paper, no oil. He used a simple piece of wood and a bow. And in a moment, a tiny ember glowed. He fed it with dry grass, and a small, clean flame rose. It was a fire that gave light and heat, but almost no smoke. He moved back to her. He had a small leather pouch. He pointed at her ankle. She recoiled. "Do not touch me." He stopped. His eyes, in the new firelight, were flat. "It must be set, or you will not walk." She knew it was true. She had to trust him. She nodded, her jaw tight. His hands were rough, but his touch was surprisingly precise. He examined the swollen joint. It was not gentle. He was a man dealing with a problem. He moved the bone. She cried out, a sharp, bitten-off sound. He did not pause. He said it was not broken. It was a bad turn. He took a handful of dried leaves from his pouch, chewed them into a wet poultice, and applied it to her skin. The sensation was strange, cool and tingling. He bound the ankle tightly with a long strip of clean cloth. When he was done, he moved away and sat on his own side of the fire. He took something from a bag. It was a piece of dark, dried meat. He tossed it to her. She caught it. It was hard as wood and smelled salty. She was starving. She tore at it with her teeth. It was tough, but it was food. He also gave her a small cake of ground corn, dry and gritty, but it filled her empty stomach. He ate the same and drank from a water skin, which he then passed to her. They ate in silence. The fire crackled. The small room was warm now. It was a strange, terrible domesticity. 2 enemies, trapped together by a fire. Alice finally found her voice. It was thin. "What will you do with me?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable. The scar on his arm was a pale line in the firelight. He said nothing. "Will you let me go? Will you take me to a town?" He looked at the fire. "No town is safe. They look for you, the blue coats, your family." "My family." The word felt like acid on her tongue. "He said your father sent soldiers. They had paper with your name. They would take you back." She had no answer. He was right. She was a piece of property. He asked, "Why did you run?" The question surprised her. It was the first personal thing he had asked. She looked away, at the curved, dark wall of the hogan. I was to be married, to a man I have never seen, a man in California. My father made the arrangement. Jacob was silent for a long time. He poked the fire with a stick. He said, "Your people buy and sell everything, even their daughters." His words cut her, because they were the exact truth, a truth she had run across a continent to escape. She looked at him, a new anger rising. "And your people, you kill, you stole me from them." He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. The fire was in them. He said, "They came to my land. They killed my brother. They killed my wife. They burned my home. They took my people to a prison camp. I kill, yes, I kill to be free." He touched the scar on his arm. "I kill so I do not wear their chains. You," he pointed at her, "you were already in chains. I cut one. Now you are here." The silence that followed was heavy. He had shared a piece of his own raw pain. He had shown her the wound beneath the scar, and he had shown her the truth of her own life. She had run from one cage and into another. He stood up. He told her to sleep. He would watch. He took a blanket and the stolen army rifle and went outside. She heard him settle near the door. He was a guard, but was he guarding her, or guarding them both from the outside world? She lay back on the soft wool, her ankle throbbing, her stomach full, her mind a spinning chaos. She was safe. She was a captive. She was with a man she should fear, a man who had killed. Yet, he had been right. He had, in his own brutal way, set her free. The days fell into a strange, hard rhythm. Jacob would leave before the sun was high. He would be gone for hours, scouting, hunting. He always left her water and a small portion of food. He told her not to leave the hogan. He told her not to make a fire. The soldiers, he said, were still looking. They were angry. They were hunting the man who had attacked them. They were hunting him. And by association, her. She was alone. The hogan was her world. It was a 6-pace circle of packed earth. At first, the terror and the silence were a living thing, a weight that pressed down on her. She was Alice Harrison of Philadelphia. She knew how to play the pianoforte. She knew French. She knew how to manage a household of servants. She knew nothing. She was helpless. She was a burden. She hated it. The wound to her pride was deeper than the wound to her ankle. She began to move, first just to the doorway, to feel the sun. Her ankle was healing. The poultice he applied each night worked. She began to walk. She explored the small cleft in the rock. It was a prison, but a beautiful one. Red rock, a sliver of blue sky. The stolen horse was their only other companion. She had to do something. She could not just wait. Like a doll, she found his bag of corn. She found a flat stone and a round one. She began to grind. It was brutal, back-breaking work. Her soft hands blistered, then bled, then hardened. When he returned that evening, he saw the small pile of fresh, coarse meal. He nodded once. It was the first sign of approval he had ever given her. She took it as a victory. She began to work. She cleaned the pots with sand. She mended her torn skirt with a bone needle and sinew she found in his bag. She was clumsy. Her stitches were large and ugly, but she was doing. She fought with herself. This was not her life. This was madness. She was living in a mud hut with a man her society called a savage, a man who had taken lives. She should be terrified. She should be looking for any way to escape. She was a traitor to her people, to her class, to her blood. By sitting here, grinding his corn, she was accepting this. She was becoming something else. But then, in the long, silent nights, she would reconsider. What was she betraying? A father who sold her, a society that caged her, a world of velvet manners and cold hearts. She had run from that world because it was false. This world, this hogan, this man, it was not false. It was brutally real. Hunger was real. Pain was real. Survival was real. Jacob was the most real man she had ever met. He was hard. Yes, he was reserved. He was a wall of silence. But he was not false. He did what he said. He lived by a code she could not understand, but she could see it was a code of strength. She found herself watching him when he sat by the fire, mending a piece of harness. His hands were strong and quick. When he spoke to the horse, his voice was low and gentle. It was a voice he never used with her. She felt a strange, sharp pang of something, jealousy, of a horse. The feelings grew. They grew in the silence. They grew in the forced intimacy of the small, round room. They slept 6 feet apart. She could hear him breathe. She could smell the faint, clean scent of him, smoke and desert sage. She had been raised to believe love was a polite arrangement, a matter of social standing and quiet affection. This thing she felt, this confusing, frightening pull toward a man who was her opposite in every way. It was not polite. It was deep. It was earthy. It was terrifying. The tension between them grew with her healing ankle. They were two people pushed too close. The differences in their worlds scraped against each other, raw and painful. She did not understand his ways. He would stand at the entrance of the hogan every morning, facing the east, and breathe in the new day. His eyes closed. It looked like a prayer. She asked him what he was doing. He said, "I am welcoming the sun. It is a new day." She said, "It is just a day." He turned to her, his face hard. He said, "To you, maybe, to me, it is a gift. Each day the sun rises, I am still here. My people are still here. It is a victory." She didn't know what to say. Her days in Philadelphia had been things to be filled, to be endured, not victories. He, in turn, found her complex to the point of madness. She was a creature of strange needs. She wept one afternoon, quiet tears she tried to hide. He had found her. He asked her, his voice rough with impatience, why she cried. "You have food. You have water. Your foot is healing. No one has harmed you." She looked at him, her face stained with tears and dirt. "I am lonely. I am confused. I do not know what my life is." He stared at her as if she had grown a second head. He said, "You are alive. That is your life. Why do you make it so hard?" He did not understand her questions, her sadness, her sudden small smiles. She was a white woman. She was soft. She was a complication he did not need. His life was simple. Survive, fight, be free. She made nothing simple. The frustration broke open one evening. He had returned, his mood darker than usual. He had seen a fresh army patrol. They were miles away. But they were searching. He said, "You are trouble. You bring them here." Alice, her own nerves frayed, stood up. She was no longer the terrified, weak woman he had found. Her hands were hard now. Her face was brown from the sun. She said, "I did not ask to be brought here. I did not ask for you to attack those soldiers." He stepped toward her, his anger a visible force in the small room. He said, "You would be with them now. You would be on your way to your new owner." His words hit her. She fired back. "And what am I now? Your prisoner. Your squaw." The word was ugly. She knew it as soon as she said it. His face went cold. He grabbed her arm. His grip was steel. He said, his voice dangerously low, "I am not one of your white men. I do not buy women. I do not own you. If you were my woman, you would know it." The intensity in his eyes, the heat of his grip, it sent a shock through her. It was not just anger. It was something else, something hot and fierce. She pulled her arm away. I do not. He let her go. He turned his back to her. He said, "You are too complicated. Your world is built on lies you tell each other. Here, there are no lies. There is the sun and the earth. There is life, and there is death, and there is us." He looked at her over his shoulder. "And I do not know what to do with you." He left the hogan. He went to stand watch. Alice sank back onto the sheepskins. her heart pounding. He was right. Her world was lies. And this terrifying, impossible situation. It was the only true thing she had ever known. She looked at the empty space where he slept. She was beginning to fall in love with him. A man she could never understand. A man who was her enemy. She felt like a traitor. And, for the first time in her life, she felt truly, terribly alive. The morning air was heavy and still. The argument from the night before hung between them in the small hogan, unspoken and sharp. Jacob's face was stone. He gave her the water skin and a piece of dried meat. His voice was flat. He said, "Do not leave the hogan. Do not make a fire. The soldiers are close. They ride in circles, like wolves who have lost the scent. Do not give it to them." He took his rifle and was gone, slipping out of the cleft in the rock like a shadow. Alice was left with the silence and his words. Do not leave. She was a prisoner. She was a burden. She was trouble. The words from last night stung her. Her ankle was strong now. She had been walking on it for days. The swelling was gone. The skin stained yellow and purple. She was tired of the 6-pace circle of packed earth. She was tired of being helpless. She was tired of being afraid. She needed to breathe. She needed to feel the sun, not as a small patch in a rocky prison, but on her whole face. She told herself it was foolish. She told herself it was dangerous. But the Harrison stubbornness, the same iron will that had sent her fleeing across a continent, pushed her. She would not be a doll in a box. Not her father's, not his. She waited. The sun was high. The silence was absolute. Just the buzz of a fly and the occasional stamp of the stolen horse. She crept to the entrance. She looked out. The narrow canyon was empty. He had forbidden her, but he was not her master. She was his captive, perhaps, but she was not his slave. She would just go to the end of the cleft where the rocks opened up, just to see. She moved, her mended boots silent enough on the sand. She reached the end of the narrow pass. The world opened up below her, a vast, blinding expanse of rock and shimmering heat. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. She felt small. She felt free. She heard a sound, a scrape, not the light, sure sound of Jacob. This was clumsy, a boot on loose gravel. Her heart stopped. She turned. 2 men, white men. They were not soldiers. They were dressed in rags, their clothes stiff with dirt. They had wild, sun-bleached beards. Their eyes, when they saw her, were bright and hard, like chips of blue glass. They carried picks, and one had a pistol stuck in his belt. Prospectors. The first one, a tall, gaunt man, stopped. He stared, his mouth opened. He said, "Well, looky here, Thomas, just look." The second man, shorter and thicker, grinned, his teeth yellow and broken. He said, "I be damned, a woman, a white woman." Alice backed away. Her blood turned to ice. These were not soldiers, bound by some small rule of law. These were men from the absolute edge of the world, men who had nothing, and therefore nothing to lose. She said, her voice shaking, "Stay back." The tall one laughed. It was a dry, ugly sound. "Stay back," she says. "She is a fine one, ain't she? Look at that hair." He took a step toward her. They were between her and the cleft, between her and the hogan. She was trapped. She said, My husband is near. He is a hunter. He will be back." The shorter one, Thomas, spat on the ground. "A hunter? We ain't scared of no hunter. We have been in these hills for 6 months. Ain't seen nothing but lizards and Indians." The tall one said, "Maybe she means an Indian. That is who you are with. Ain't you? Living in a mud hut. We seen the smoke." He lunged. Alice screamed. She turned to run, to climb the rock, anywhere. He grabbed her by the arm. His hand was like a claw. He pulled her hard. She did not freeze. The woman who had left Philadelphia would have. This woman did not. She twisted, bringing her hard shoe down on his instep. He howled, his grip loosening for a second. She clawed at his face. The second man, Thomas, grabbed her from behind, pinning her arms. He was strong. The tall one, his face bleeding from 4 long scratches, wiped the blood away. He was not smiling now. He said, "You little cat, we will teach you some manners. You are coming with us. We ain't seen a woman in—" He did not finish. There was a sound, like a hard sigh. The shorter man, Thomas, who was holding her, suddenly grunted. His grip went slack. Alice fell forward as he collapsed. She looked back. He was on the ground. A knife was in his back, buried to the hilt. The tall man stared at his partner, his eyes wide with shock. He had no time to look up. Jacob was there. He had come from the rock above, a silent, brown whirlwind. He did not have his rifle. He had only his hands, and the fury of a man whose sanctuary had been invaded. He hit the tall prospector. It was not a punch. It was a blow, with the hard edge of his hand to the man's throat. The man made a gurgling sound and fell to his knees, clutching his neck. Jacob did not pause. He pulled the knife from the dead man's back, a single, wet sound. He turned to the gurgling man. It was over in a second. Alice was on her hands and knees, breathing in great, ragged sobs. She had not screamed again. She was frozen. The world was silent again. The 2 men were still. They were just bundles of rags on the red dust. Jacob stood over them. He was breathing hard. His face was a mask of cold rage. He was not looking at the men he had killed. He was looking at her. He said, his voice a low, vibrating growl, "You did not listen." She could not speak. She just shook her head, the tears starting. She was not crying from fear of him. She was crying from the shock, from the terrible, raw violence. He came to her. He grabbed her arm, the same one the prospector had held. He hauled her to her feet. His grip was brutal. He said, "They saw you. They saw the cleft. They saw the horse. This place is not safe. We go. Now." He did not wait. He dragged her, half running, half falling, back to the hogan. He threw a water skin and a bag of food into a pouch. He pulled the blanket from her bed. He grabbed his rifle. He said, "Come." He untied the horse. He pushed her up onto its back, then swung up behind her. He kicked the horse, not back the way they had come, but up a narrow, steep trail that Alice had not even seen. They rode for hours. He did not speak. She was pressed back against his chest. She could feel the coiled anger in him, the tension in every muscle. He was furious. She had disobeyed. She had endangered them. She had brought his enemies to his door. The sun began to set. The sky turned a violent red. The wind picked up, cold and sharp. He guided the horse into a deep, black shadow, a place where the cliffs overhung a dry riverbed. It was a shallow cave, barely a scoop in the rock, sheltered from the wind. He slid from the horse and pulled her down. She stumbled. Her legs were weak. She was shaking. The reaction was setting in, a deep, bone-numbing chill. He tied the horse. He built a fire. This time it was not the small, smokeless fire of the hogan. It was fast and hot. He needed the warmth. He looked at her. She was huddled against the rock wall, her arms wrapped around her knees, trembling. He said nothing. He sat. He began to clean his knife. The sight of it, the methodical way he wiped the dark stain from the blade, it broke her. She made a small sound, a sob. He stopped. He looked at her. The anger was gone from his face. It was just tired. He looked old. He put the knife away. He came to her. He knelt. He looked at her face. The prospector's hand had left a mark, a red, raw scrape on her cheek. He reached out. His hand was rough, calloused. He touched her cheek. His thumb was surprisingly gentle. He brushed away a tear and a smudge of dirt. His eyes were dark, but they were not flat. For the first time, she saw something else in them. It was not pity. It was something deeper. It was a shared thing. He had killed for her. He had protected her. She looked back at him. She was not seeing a savage. She was not seeing her captor. She was seeing a man who was as lost as she was, in a world that was trying to kill them both. He was a man who had lost everything, and he had just fought to save her. The wind howled outside the small cave. It was a lonely, cold sound. The fire was a small island of light in a great, dark ocean. He was so close, she could feel the heat of his body. He did not move. He just watched her. His gaze was heavy. It was a look of raw, unguarded wanting. It was the look of a man who had been alone for a long time, a man who had forgotten what it was to touch, to feel. Alice knew, in that moment, that her life had changed. The old world of Philadelphia was gone. It was a ghost. Her father, her forced marriage, her polite society. It meant nothing. This was real. This man, this cave, this terrible, beautiful land. She was in love with him? The realization was a shock. As violent as the attack, it was a terrifying, impossible love. It was a love for a man hunted by her people. It was a love that meant accepting his world, a world of dirt and blood and sudden death. It meant accepting a bond that her world would call a sin. She was afraid. Not of him. She was afraid of this total, terrifying leap. He saw the fear in her eyes. He mistook it. He thought it was fear of him, of what had happened. He began to pull away. The warrior, the solitary man, was returning. He was closing the wall again. She could not let him. If he pulled away now, she would be alone again. Truly alone. She reached out. Her hand was shaking. She put it on his arm, the one with the long, white scar. The muscle under his skin was hard as rock. He froze. She leaned in. Her voice was a bare thread of sound, almost lost in the wind. She whispered the words, "Stay tonight." It was not a question. It was a plea. She moved, her heart a hammer. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He was stiff, a statue of resistance. She turned her face. She pressed her lips to the warm, brown skin of his neck. And then, in a small, sharp act of pure, desperate instinct, she bit him, gently, a small claim, a shock. It broke his control. He made a sound, a low growl. His arm came around her, pulling her against him. His other hand was in her hair, tilting her face up. The Navajo warrior kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was not the polite, dry press of lips she had been taught. It was fierce. It was a collision. It was all the anger of the day and all the loneliness of the years. It was a kiss of hunger and of desperation and of a profound, raw claiming. It was the taste of smoke and salt and the desert itself. It took her breath. It branded her. She kissed him back, holding on to him as if he were the only solid thing in a world that had come apart. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. The firelight played on his face. He looked at her, his eyes dark and burning. He said, his voice low and rough, his hands still tangled in her hair, his words a promise and a warning. "Till the sun finds us." He bent his head again, and this time there was no more fear. There was only the night and the fire and the storm and the two of them, finally, completely, alone. The sun found them. It was a spear of gold light that lanced into the mouth of the cave, striking the rock wall above their heads. Alice woke slowly, her body warm for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. She was not on the cold ground. She was on the thick army blanket, and Jacob was beside her. His own blanket was tangled with hers. His arm was heavy across her waist. She lay still, her heart a slow, heavy beat. The events of the night replayed in her mind. His kiss, his touch, the wind howling outside, and the fire burning low. It felt like a dream, a fever dream born of violence and fear. But the man beside her was real. His sleeping face, turned toward her, was not the stone mask of the warrior. In sleep, the lines of anger and vigilance were gone. He looked younger. He looked, she thought, unguarded. His eyes opened. They were dark and clear, and they saw her instantly. There was no confusion. He was awake. He remembered. His arm did not move from her waist. He just looked at him. She looked back. The chasm between their worlds was still there, but they had stood in it together. She whispered, "Good morning." He did not smile. His face remained serious, but the hardness was gone. He said, "The sun is here." It was not a greeting, it was a statement. The truce of the night was over. The day, with its dangers, had returned. He sat up, pulling the blanket with him. The cold air hit her bare shoulders. He turned, his back to her, and began to pull on his shirt. The intimacy was broken, replaced by a sudden, sharp modesty. Alice dressed quickly, her fingers fumbling with the rough cloth of her mended dress. Her old life, her old rules, seemed 1,000 years away. She was a different woman. She did not know who she was, but she knew she was his. He stood, his rifle in his hand. He went to the mouth of the cave. He said, "We must go. That place, the Hogan, it is dead to us. The men you brought, they were not soldiers. They were prospectors. They answer to no one, but they come from towns. They will be missed. Others will come. And the soldiers, they are still hunting." He was right. Her foolish act of defiance had cost them their sanctuary. They rode the stolen horse for 2 days, moving deeper into the labyrinth of red rock, away from the places the soldiers patrolled, away from the trails the miners used. He moved with a new purpose. He was no longer just hiding. He was going somewhere. He was different. He spoke more. Not much, but the silence between them was no longer a wall. It was a space they shared. He taught her the name of a plant that held water in its roots. He showed her how to read the clouds for a change in the weather. She rode in front of him, leaning back against his chest, and it no longer felt like a capture. It felt like a protection. On the evening of the second day, they came to a place that did not look like a place at all. It was a sheer canyon wall, a dead end. But Jacob dismounted. He led the horse to a narrow crack in the rock, a fissure hidden by a curtain of ancient, dry brush. They walked through it, and the world opened up. It was a box canyon, hidden from the sky, a half-mile long and fed by a tiny, weeping spring. 3 hogans, low and round like his had been, were nestled against the far wall. A small flock of sheep, their wool thick and dirty, grazed on the sparse grass. An old woman, her face a map of wrinkles, looked up from grinding corn. A half-dozen children, their bodies thin, stopped their play and stared. A tall, gaunt man with eyes as hard as Jacob's stepped out of the largest hogan. He held an old rifle. Jacob raised his hand. His voice was in the Navajo tongue, low and formal. The man, Hashke, lowered his rifle, but his eyes did not soften. He looked at Jacob, and then his gaze moved to Alice. It was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. He spoke. His voice was a harsh rasp. Alice did not need to understand the words. The meaning was clear. "What is this? Why do you bring her here?" Jacob spoke for a long time. He spoke of the soldiers, of the fight, of the prospectors. He spoke of the old hogan being compromised. Hashke listened. Then he spoke again, jabbing a finger not at Alice, but at Jacob. He was angry. This was an accusation. Jacob's voice was low, but it was steel. He was not asking for permission. He was stating a fact. Hashke turned. He spat on the ground near Alice's feet. He went back inside his hogan. The old woman went back to her grinding. The children, after a moment, resumed their silent play. They were ignored. They were invisible. But it was an invisibility that was heavy and cold. Jacob led her to the smallest hogan. It was empty, a place for storage, or for guests who were never expected. He said, "This is a place of ghosts, the families that lived here. They are at Bosque Redondo, or they are in the ground. Hashke lost his sons. He lost his wife. He sees your skin, and he sees them. Alice said, "He hates me." Jacob nodded. He said, "He hates what you are. He does not know you." He left her. He had duties. He had to speak with the others. He had to take his turn at watch, at a high point above the canyon. Alice was left in the cold. Empty Hogan. This was his world. This was his people. And she was the enemy. She was the serpent in their hidden garden. The next days were the hardest she had known. Harder than being lost. Harder than the fear of the prospectors. This was a pain of the soul. She was an outcast. The old woman would not look at her. The children would run if she came near. Only Jacob spoke to her. She had to try. She was not a guest. She was not a prisoner. She was something else. She took her small bag of corn and went to the place where the old woman, whose name was Sani, worked. She sat. She did not sit close, but she sat nearby. She took her stones and began to grind. Sani did not look up. The sound of the two stones, grinding and grinding, was the only sound. Alice's hands were soft. She was clumsy, but she worked. She worked until her back ached and her hands were raw. Jacob was torn. He was a man split in two. He would return from his watch, his eyes tired. He would see Alice sitting alone, working, her head bent. He would see the other women, on the far side of the spring, talking, their backs to her. He loved her. The night in the cave had sealed it. He loved her strength, the fire in her that matched his own. He loved the way she looked at him, as if he were a man. Not a monster, not a hero, just a man. But his people were in danger. He felt the pull of his duty. This small camp was one of the last free places. He was a protector, and he had brought the danger into their midst. Hashke confronted him again. This time, they spoke in low, angry whispers by the sheep pen. Hashke said, "In their tongue, she makes you weak. You are a warrior. You are thinking with a part of you that is not your head." Jacob said, "She is one person. She is not the army." Hashke said, "She is the honey, and the flies will follow. The soldiers look for her. They will not stop. When they find her, they find us. You are risking all of us for her." The accusation hung in the cold night air. Jacob had no answer, because he knew Hashke was right. The next day, he rode out. He had to know what was happening in the world outside. He rode for a full day, back toward the settlement of Green River. He did not go close. He went to the burned-out shell of a trading post, a place where travelers sometimes left messages or nailed notices. He found it, a new piece of paper, nailed to the charred door frame. It was a drawing of his own face. It was a poor likeness, but it was him, and beneath it, words. Wanted. For kidnapping and murder. Alice Harrison. Taken by the Navajo renegade. Jacob. Reward, $500. His blood ran cold. It was not just a rescue anymore. He was not just a renegade. He was a kidnapper, a murderer. They had twisted the story. The prospectors, the soldiers. They had made her a victim, and him a monster. He tore the paper from the wood. $500. That was more money than most men saw in a year. It was enough to make any man a hunter. The world was not just looking for her. It was hunting him. He rode back, his heart a stone. He felt the trap closing. His love for Alice was a bright, warm thing, the only one he had felt since his family had died. But it was a fire that was attracting the wolves. He was caught. He was a Navajo warrior. His life was sworn to his people, to this land. He could not abandon them. He could not leave them to be slaughtered because of the white woman he loved. But he could not abandon her. He looked at his hands on the reins. These were the hands that had killed for her. These were the hands that had held her. He could not give her up. He could not send her back to her father's cage, or let the soldiers take her. He was trapped between his duty and his heart. He felt the old scar on his arm begin to ache. It always ached when the choice was impossible. He knew, as he rode back into the hidden canyon, that he could not stay. He could not have both. He could not live in her world, and she could not live in his. He had to make a choice, and he knew, with a cold, sinking certainty, that any choice he made would mean a war. He rode back into the hidden canyon as the last light of day painted the cliffs a deep, bloody red. The air was still. The small camp was quiet. The people already inside their hogans. He saw Alice. She was sitting outside their small, empty hogan, a blanket around her shoulders, watching the path, waiting for him. She stood when she saw him. The look on her face, a mix of relief and worry, was a knife in his gut. She had been grinding corn. Her hands, he could see, were stained with the blue of the kernels. She was working. She was trying to belong. And he was the one who had made it impossible. He dismounted, the horse too tired to even shake. He did not go to her immediately. He went to Hashke, who was standing in the shadow of his own hogan, his arms crossed. Jacob spoke in their language. "They are coming." Hashke just nodded. His eyes were dead. He said, "They are always coming." Jacob said, "No, this is different. They hunt me. They have my name. They have my face. They call me a kidnapper." Hashke looked at Alice, who was standing by the empty hogan, watching them. He said, "And what are you?" "You stole her. You brought this trouble." Jacob said, "I am taking her away. We leave tonight." A flicker of something, maybe relief, passed over Hashke's face. He said, "Good. Go. Go far. Go to the mountains. Take your trouble with you." Jacob walked to Alice. She saw his face, and she knew. She said, "What is it? What did you find?" He did not want to show her the paper. He did not want her to see the words. Kidnapper, murderer. He did not want her to see how her world, her people, had turned him into a monster. He said, "We are leaving. Tonight. Just us." She looked around at the small, hidden canyon. "This is not safe." He shook his head. "No, I am not safe. I make this place unsafe. I am hunted, and they are hunting you." He pulled the crumpled paper from his shirt. He handed it to her. She read it in the dying light. Her hands began to shake. $500. For him, for her. She looked at his face. They had made him a criminal. She said, They say you murdered those men, the prospectors." He said, "I did. I killed them. To save you." She looked at the paper again. "No, this is wrong. They attacked me." He took the paper from her. He said, "It does not matter. It is their story, their world. We do not belong in it, and we cannot stay here. We are a danger to these people." She understood. Her presence and his love for her was a poison to his own. She nodded, her jaw set. The Harrison strength, the iron will, it was there. She was not a victim. She said, "Where?" He said, "North, to the high mountains, places they cannot follow. But we must go now, while it is dark." They moved quickly. There was little to take. A water skin, a bag of her blue cornmeal, the blankets. The horse was rested. Jacob checked his rifle, his knife. Alice put the cornmeal in a saddlebag. She was not crying. She was focused. This was her choice. She had made it in the cave. This was the price. A cry split the night. It was a high, ululating call from the man on watch, high on the canyon rim. It was not a call of warning. It was a call of attack. Jacob froze. He threw Alice toward the ground, behind a trough of rock. He pulled his rifle. Hashke was already out, his own rifle in his hand. The camp, silent a moment before, was chaos. The old woman, Sani, was pulling the children toward a hidden cleft in the rock, a small, dark hole that led deeper into the mountain. Then they heard it, the sound of dozens of horses, the jingle of sabers, the shouted commands in English. They were not at the entrance. They were above. They had found another way. They were on the rim. The first shots exploded. Muzzle flashes lit the dark. Bullets ricocheted off the canyon walls, a deadly, whining song. It was a trap. The soldiers were not a small patrol. It was a company. They had been led here. Perhaps the prospectors had been part of a larger group. Perhaps the soldiers had a tracker. It did not matter. They were here. Jacob yelled to Alice, "Stay down! Do not move!" He ran to join Hashke. The two men, enemies in their own way, were now brothers. They took cover behind the sheep pen. The other two men of the camp joined them. 4 warriors against a company. The soldiers were using the high ground, firing down into the small camp. It was a slaughter. One of the Navajo men cried out and fell, his chest a dark stain. Jacob fired. He was a good shot. A soldier on the rim cried out and tumbled into the dark. Hashke yelled, "They are coming from the pass. They are in the entrance." He was right. A second group of soldiers, on foot, was storming the narrow fissure that was the canyon's only entrance, the one Jacob had used. They were trapped. "We have to fall back," Jacob yelled, "to the caves, where Sani and the children are. We can hold the pass there." He looked for Alice. She was not where he had left her. He scanned the chaos. He saw her. She was not hiding. She was running, bent low, toward Sani. One of the children had fallen. Alice scooped the small girl up and half threw, half carried her toward the old woman, pushing them into the dark of the small cave. She was strong. She was brave. She was not the woman from Philadelphia. Jacob and Hashke and the last remaining man fired, covering the retreat. They ran, low and fast, back toward the caves. Alice was there, at the mouth of the cave. Sani and the children were inside. Alice was holding a rifle. It was the rifle of the man who had fallen. She said, her voice tight, "I can load." Jacob nodded. He did not have time to be surprised. He and Hashke took positions on either side of the cave entrance. It was a narrow, dark opening, a perfect choke point. The soldiers, charging across the open ground of the camp, would be easy targets. Alice knelt between them, in the shadow. Her hands were shaking, but she worked. Powder, ball, ram. She did it just as he had shown her. She loaded one rifle as he fired the other. They fought, the 3 of them. A warrior, a broken man, and a runaway. They held the mouth of the cave. The soldiers in the canyon pass could not get a clean shot. The soldiers on the rim were too high. But the men who had charged the camp were relentless. They saw the flashes from the cave. They charged. Jacob fired. A man fell. He tossed the empty rifle to Alice. She gave him the loaded one. Hashke fired. Another man fell. But they kept coming. A man reached the cave, a big man with a sergeant's stripes. He had a pistol. He saw Jacob. He raised his pistol. Hashke lunged. He did not fire. He had no time. He hit the sergeant with his body. They went down, rolling. The sergeant's pistol went off. The shot whined. Hashke's knife was in his hand. He raised it. Another soldier was right behind the sergeant. He leveled his rifle. He fired. Hashke's body jerked. He looked surprised. He fell onto the sergeant. "No!" Jacob screamed. He raised his rifle, but the soldier was already on him. The soldier swung his own rifle like a club, knocking Jacob's barrel aside. Alice saw it. She was holding the rifle she had just loaded. She did not think. She raised it. She pulled the trigger. The explosion was deafening. The rifle kicked her hard, sending her sprawling backward. The soldier in front of Jacob stared at her, a look of profound shock on his face. He looked down at his chest. Then he fell. Jacob was on his feet. He looked at her, his eyes wide. She had saved his life. There was a shout from outside. An officer. "Cease fire! Cease fire! We have them!" The shooting stopped. The silence was sudden and terrible. It was filled with the groans of the wounded. A new voice, a corporal. He was standing just outside the cave, his rifle aimed not at Jacob, but at her. He said, "That is her, that is the one, the Harrison woman." Another man stepped forward. He was not a soldier. He was a man in a dark suit, a man with a cold, hard face. Alice had seen him before. He was Mr. Davies, her father's man of business. He was the one who had arranged her passage. He said, his voice flat and emotionless, "Alice Harrison, you have caused an unspeakable amount of trouble, and cost your father a great deal of money." Jacob raised his rifle. Davies did not flinch. The corporal said, "Drop it, Navajo, or she dies." More soldiers were there, a half-dozen rifles, all aimed at Alice. She looked at Jacob. His face was a mask of rage and despair. He was trapped. Davies said, "They will not harm you. Alice, if you come now, your father wants you home." Home, the word was a joke. A prison. Slowly, Jacob lowered his rifle. He was beaten. 2 soldiers moved in. They did not grab Jacob. They left him. He was not the prize. They grabbed Alice. She did not fight. It was useless. They pulled her to her feet. She looked at Jacob. His eyes were black holes of pain. He had lost his friend. He had lost his home. And now he was losing her. They dragged her out of the cave. She looked back. He was a dark shape in the shadows, bleeding from a cut on his head, his friend dead at his feet. The corporal laughed. He said, "What about the renegade? The murderer?" Davies looked at Jacob. He said, "He is nothing. He is a savage. Leave him to his rocks. We have what we came for." They pulled her away. They put her on a horse. The sergeant, the one Hashke had stabbed, was on the ground, wounded but alive. He looked at her and spat. As they rode out of the canyon, past the bodies of the Navajo men, past the burning hogans, Alice looked back. She was being taken. She was being returned to the cage. Jacob was standing at the mouth of the cave. He was watching her go. His people were dead. His home was destroyed. He had to choose, fight for her, or stay and bury his dead. He had a choice. He could run. He could try to follow, but they were too many. He was one man. He saw her look back. He saw the tears on her face. He saw her, a captive, being led away by her own people. He had failed. He had failed to protect his home, and he had failed to save her. He was alone. He stood in the dark of the cave and watched them go. He watched the bobbing lights of the soldiers' torches, heard the sound of their horses, until they were a faint murmur, and then nothing. The silence they left behind was louder than the battle. It was a screaming, empty void. He turned. The body of Hashke lay crumpled by the entrance. His eyes were open, staring at the rock ceiling. Jacob knelt. He closed his friend's eyes. He had failed him. He had failed all of them. He had brought the white world's poison into their last, safe place. A small sound came from the back of the cave. Sani, the old woman. She and the children were huddled in the darkness. She was chanting, a low, keening song of grief. His rage was a cold, hard thing. It was not the hot flash of a fight. It was the deep, solid ice of a winter river. They had taken her. They had taken Alice. They had called him a murderer. They had called him a kidnapper. They, who had burned his home, killed his friend, and stolen the woman he loved. He owed Hashke a burial. He owed Sani and the children safety. He took the last man's rifle and Hashke's knife. He went out into the ruined camp. He found the bodies of the other 2 men, under the cold light of the stars. He worked. He carried his fallen comrades to a high cleft in the rock, a place where the wolves could not reach. He covered them with stones, one by one, until his hands were raw. He said the old words. He asked them to walk the pollen path to the next world. He went back to the cave. He gave Sani the last of the food, the bags of corn. He gave her a water skin. He told her where to go, a high spring 2 days' walk, a place no soldier would ever find. She looked at him, her old eyes filled with a grief so deep it was bottomless. She said nothing. She just nodded. She knew. He was done. His duty to his people, this small, broken remnant, was finished. He had only one duty left. He took his rifle, he took his knife, he took one water skin and a handful of dried meat. He was a ghost now. He had nothing left to lose. He was a man made of anger and shadow. He began to run. He knew where they were going. Green River. They would be moving slow. They had a prisoner. They had a civilian. Her father's man. Davies. They would be arrogant. They had won. He did not follow their trail. He ran parallel to it, a mile to the south, using the high, broken ridges. He was faster on foot than they were on horseback. He knew the land. He knew the shortcuts, the dry washes, the deer tracks. He moved all night, his moccasins silent on the rock. He saw their camp just before dawn. They had stopped in a wide, open clearing near a creek. A foolish place to camp, too exposed. But they had numbers. They had 20 men. They had posted sentries. They had a picket line for their horses. They had a fire. He saw 2 tents. One was for the officer, Captain Wells. The other, with 2 guards standing right outside it, would be hers. He settled into the rocks above the camp. 100 yards away, he watched. He was patient. He was a hunter. He watched the sun come up. He watched the soldiers make their breakfast. He saw Davies emerge from the officer's tent, his dark suit dusty. He saw them bring Alice out. She was not in chains, but she was a prisoner. Her hands were tied in front of her. They gave her water and a piece of hardtack. She did not eat. She stared at the fire. He looked for the marks of her grief, of her fear. He saw them, but he also saw the set of her jaw. He saw the iron. She was not broken. She was waiting. She was the woman who had fired a rifle to save his life. He waited all day. The sun beat on his back. He did not move. He did not eat. He drank a single mouthful of water. He watched the sentries. He memorized their rotation. He watched the layout of the camp. He saw where they kept the ammunition. He saw where the officers slept. He saw the 2 guards at her tent. They were relieved every 2 hours. They were lazy. They talked. They smoked. The sun set. The camp settled. The fire burned bright. The night grew cold. He waited. He waited until the moon was high, until the camp was in its deepest sleep. He waited until the 2 guards at her tent were bored and cold, their attention wandering. He moved. He was not a man. He was a shadow. He slipped down from the rocks. He moved through the sagebrush. He had to create a diversion. He could not fight 20 men. He went to the horses. They were tied to a long rope, a picket line. He moved among them. They smelled him. The scent of Navajo, of wolf. They shifted, their eyes rolling. He whispered to them. He was a man of horses. He calmed them, even as he worked. He took his knife. He began to cut the rope. Not all at once. He frayed it, strand by strand, until it was hanging by a thread. He moved away. He needed a sound. He crept toward the back of the officer's tent. He found the ammunition boxes. He found a small bag of black powder. He took a handful. He crept back toward the fire. The camp was silent. A sentry coughed. Jacob took a long, flat stone. He sprinkled the powder on it. He took a smaller stone. He was 20 yards from the fire. He aimed at the cast-iron pot of coffee that sat in the coals. He struck the stones. A flash, a spark. The powder ignited with a dull whoosh and a cloud of acrid smoke. It was not loud, but it was sudden. A sentry yelled, "What was that?" Jacob was already moving. He was at the picket line. He gave a high, sharp cry, the cry of a hawk. He slapped the nearest horse on the rump. The animal screamed, pulled back. The frayed rope snapped. It was chaos. Horses were screaming, rearing, pulling free. They stampeded, thundering through the edge of the camp, trampling a stack of saddles, running in blind panic into the night. Men were shouting, "To the horses! Get the horses!" The sentries, the guards, every man who was not asleep, ran toward the picket line. The camp was in turmoil. Jacob ran the other way, toward her tent. The 2 guards there had turned, drawn by the sound. They were looking at the stampede. They were perfect targets. He did not use his rifle. He used his knife. He was on the first man from behind, his hand over the man's mouth, the blade drawn across his throat. The man went down without a sound. The second guard heard the fall. He turned. He opened his mouth to shout. Jacob threw his knife. The blade took the man in the chest. He stumbled, his rifle clattering on the rocks. Jacob was inside the tent. She was there, on a cot. She was awake. Her eyes were wide in the dark. He put his hand over her mouth. He said, "It is me." She did not cry. She did not tremble. She bit his hand, gently, the same way she had in the cave. He pulled his knife from the dead guard. He cut the ropes on her wrists. He said, "Come, now." They were out of the tent. Men were still shouting, chasing horses, but some were running back. Davies was shouting, "She is gone! He is here!" A shot, a bullet sang past Jacob's ear. He grabbed her hand. "Run!" They ran, not toward the rocks he had come from, but toward the creek. He knew this land. He needed the water. They plunged into the shallow, icy water. It was a shock to the system. It would cover their tracks. Wells, the captain, was shouting, "To the creek! They are in the creek! Fire at will!" Bullets slapped the water around them. They were splashes of cold death in the dark. Jacob pushed her. "Go, up the bank, to the rocks." They scrambled up the far bank, mud and water streaming from them. They were in a narrow wash, a dry riverbed. It was a perfect channel, but it was a trap. They ran. He had his rifle. He stopped. He turned. He fired at the lights behind them. A man screamed. He ran. He reloaded as he ran. He knew this wash. It ended in a narrow slot, a space they could climb. They were almost there. He could see the dark V of the exit, 100 yards ahead. He stopped, to fire again, to give her time. A soldier, smarter than the rest, had run up the side of the wash. He was on the rim, above them. He had a clear shot. Jacob saw him at the last second. He raised his rifle. The soldier fired. It was a hammer blow. It hit Jacob in the side, high on his ribs. It spun him around. He fell to his knees. The rifle clattered. Alice screamed. Jacob looked up. The soldier was reloading. Jacob was too far. He had no knife. He was exposed. Alice did not run. She did not hide. She grabbed Jacob's fallen rifle. She was not a warrior. She did not know how to aim, but she was the woman from the cave. She pointed it up. She pulled the trigger. The explosion was a flash of orange light. The recoil sent her to the ground. The soldier on the rim did not fire. He just disappeared. Jacob was on his knees, clutching his side. Blood was pouring through his fingers. It was dark, almost black in the moonlight. Alice scrambled to him. "Jacob, Jacob!" He looked at her. He was in pain. He was dying. He said, "Go, run! They are coming!" She looked back. The lights were closer. She could hear the men shouting. He pushed her. "Go! You are free! Leave me!" She looked at his face. She saw the pain. She saw the love. He was giving her her life, the one he had fought for, the one he had killed for. She shook her head. She put her shoulder under his arm. She pulled. She said no. She pulled him, half dragging, half carrying his weight. He was a dead weight. He was bleeding. She said, "You stayed for me. I am staying for you." She pulled him toward the dark V of the slot canyon. She was a small woman, and he was a strong man, but her will was iron. She was a Harrison, and she was his. He was in and out of consciousness. He was a terrible, heavy burden. She heard him groan. She got him to the rocks. She pulled him into the narrow space. The soldiers could only come one at a time. She looked back. The soldiers had stopped. They were afraid of the narrow pass. They would wait for light. She had time, a few hours. She pulled him deeper until they were in a small, hidden bowl of rock. He collapsed. He was pale. His breathing was shallow. She tore a long strip from her skirt. She pressed it, hard, against the wound in his side. He cried out, a thin, sharp sound. She held it. She held it with all her strength. The blood was hot. It soaked the rag. The wilderness was all around them. It was dark and cold and full of enemies. She was alone, with a dying man. But she was not afraid. She was a captive no longer. She was his protector. The first light of dawn was a cold, gray smear in the sky. Alice held the wad of cloth against his side, her arms aching with a fatigue so deep it felt like it was in her bones. The rag was soaked. His blood was on her hands, on her dress, on the rock beneath them. He was alive, but his breathing was a shallow, wet rasp. He was watching her. His eyes were open, dark with pain, but clear. He had not lost consciousness again. He was watching her face, her hands, the way she held the pressure, her jaw set, her whole body trembling with cold and exhaustion. He saw her. He saw her in a way he had never seen her before. She was not the lost, pale woman from the ravine. She was not the prisoner in his hogan. She was not the white woman who was his enemy. She was the woman who had shot a soldier. She was the woman who had dragged his dying body to safety, who had refused to leave him. She was the woman who had bit his hand in the tent, a small, fierce claim. He thought of his first wife. He thought of her laugh. He thought of his brother. He thought of Hashke, dead in the dirt. His eyes opened to a sky that would not see him. They were all gone. His past was a field of graves. He had spent years honoring those graves with violence, with a cold, clean anger that had become his only purpose. He had been a warrior for the dead. And it had brought him here, bleeding, dying. It had brought the fire and the guns to Sani and the children. It had cost Hashke his life. His war, his private, just war, had only made more ghosts. He looked at Alice. She was not a ghost. She was solid. She was life. She was a different kind of strength, a stubborn, iron will that had bent but had not broken. She had been sold by her father, hunted by her government, hated by his people. And she was still here. She had chosen him. She had chosen this. She was, he realized, the only person left in his world. A shout echoed up the narrow pass. It was English. "They are in here. I see blood. Lots of it." Alice's head snapped up. Her eyes were wide with a new, fresh terror. They were coming. Dawn was here. Jacob put his hand over hers, on the wound. His hand was cold. His voice was a bare rasp, a dry scrape of air. "There is a way." She looked at him. "We cannot move. You are—" "A way. Up." He nodded his head toward the back of the small rock bowl. It looked like a solid wall. "A chimney. A crack. I have used it to hunt. Eagles." It was a path for a healthy man. A path for a shadow. Not for a dying man and a woman who had never climbed. "They will find us," she whispered. "They will kill us," he answered. He pushed himself with his good arm. A terrible, wet groan tore from his throat. He slumped back. "I cannot—" "Yes," she said. Her voice was not a plea. It was a command. She put her arm under his back. "You will. Get up." She pulled. He shouted in pain, but he used her strength. He got his feet under him. He was a dead weight. She was his crutch. He was leaning on her, his arm draped over her shoulders, his side a solid, hot sheet of agony. They moved. One step, then another. They reached the back of the cleft. He was right, a narrow, vertical crack, barely wide enough for a man's shoulders. "You first," he panted, his forehead slick with sweat. "I will push." "I will not leave you behind." "You will pull." She looked at the rock. It was impossible. She was a Harrison. She had climbed trees as a girl. To her father's fury. She could do this. She had to. She found the first handhold. The rock was cold, sharp. She pulled herself up. She found a foothold. She climbed. It was 10 feet, then 20. She was not graceful. She was a creature of pure, desperate will. She reached a small ledge, a place barely wide enough to stand. She looked down. He was there, a dark shape, leaning against the rock. She tore another long strip from her skirt, her last good one. She tied it to the strip she had used for his wound. It was a flimsy rope, barely 15 feet long. "Tie it," she called down, her voice a harsh whisper. "Around your arm, your good one." He did. She pulled. He used his legs, his one good arm, to climb. She pulled until her muscles burned, until her hands were raw and bleeding. He was a terrible, dragging weight. His groans were soft, animal sounds of pure pain. He reached the ledge. He collapsed, his breathing ragged. The wound was open again, a fresh, dark flood. Below them, in the pass, they heard the soldiers. "There is blood, but no bodies. They went up the rock." They had no time. Jacob looked at her. He was fading. His eyes were losing their focus. He had to tell her. He had to make her understand. He grabbed her arm. His grip was weak. "Alice." She put her hand to his face. "I am here. We are almost there." "No, listen." He forced the words out. "I am done. The war, my war, it is finished." She looked at him, uncomprehending. "The soldiers, they are not done. They can have the rocks," he panted. "They can have the anger. It is poison. It killed Hashka. It killed my wife. It will not kill you." He touched her cheek, his fingers leaving a bloody smear. "You are my people, my Dine. You are my home." Tears streamed down her face, washing away the dirt. She understood. He was letting it go. He was letting go of the rage that had fueled him, the ghosts that had haunted him. He was choosing her. He was choosing life. "We will find a place," he whispered. "A new place. High, where no one will find us. No blue coats, no fathers, just us." A shot cracked out from below. The bullet hit the rock just below their feet, stinging their faces with stone chips. "Move!" she screamed, the terror giving her new strength. "Move!" She was above him now, pulling, him climbing. It was an agony. He was blacking out, coming to. He was climbing on pure animal instinct. She was his guide. She was his strength. She stop. They reached the top. They spilled out onto the flat, open mesa. The sun was a blinding, glorious explosion. It was morning. They were high above the world. They could see for 100 miles. The soldiers were ants, lost in the maze of canyons below. He fell. He did not get up. He lay on his back, on the warm stone, his blood a stark red against the yellow rock. Alice fell beside him. She was sobbing. Great, racking sobs of terror and relief. She had done it. They were free. He was dying. She ripped open his shirt. The wound was a ragged, dark hole. The bullet was still inside. He was burning with fever. He looked at her. He smiled. It was the first time she had ever seen him smile. It was a small, pained, beautiful thing. He said, "We made it." You are," she whispered, her hands hovering over the terrible wound. He took her hand. He held it. "You are a good warrior. Alice Harrison." "Stay with me," she begged. "You cannot leave me. You chose this. You chose me. You cannot leave." He held her hand. He looked at the vast blue sky. "A new life for the next, for our children. They will be strong like you. They will be of this land, not of your world or my old one, ours." His eyes closed, his grip on her hand loosened. "No," she whispered. "No, Jacob." She was alone, on a high mesa, with the body of the man she loved. The wind was the only sound. She sat there, holding his hand. As the sun climbed higher, she had run from one world and he had run from another. They had met in the middle, in a place of blood and rock. He had given her his life, and he had given her a future. She looked at the wound. She had to try. She had his knife. She had seen him use the fire. She had seen him make a poultice. She would not let him go. She had not come this far, been made this strong, to fail now. She was his partner. She would build that new life, and she would start by saving his. She took his knife. She looked at the fire. She took a deep breath. She was no longer Alice Harrison. She was his, and she would fight. The sun was a hammer. It beat on the flat rock, on Alice's back, on Jacob's pale, still face. His blood was drying, a dark crust on his skin, on the tattered cloth of his shirt. He was not moving. His breathing was a faint, shallow flutter, like the wings of a trapped bird. She was alone. The soldiers were below, in the maze. They would search, but they would not find this place. Not today, but the sun would. The sun would kill him before the soldiers could. She had to act. She had his knife. She had his flint and steel. She had the memory of his hands on her ankle, the memory of his chewed poultice. She grabbed the flint and steel from his pouch. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely strike a spark. She gathered dry, brittle brush, the sparse growth of the high mesa. She built a tiny, pathetic pile. She struck the stone. A spark, another. It caught, a thin wisp of smoke, then a small, clean flame. She held the knife in the fire. She, Alice Harrison, who had fainted at the sight of a bleeding cut at a garden party. She held the long, sharp blade until the metal glowed a dull, angry red. She knelt beside him. She said, forgive me, Jacob." She tore his shirt open. The wound was a ragged, blue-edged hole. It was dark and deep. The bullet was in there. She could feel it, a hard lump against the bone of his rib. She put the point of the hot knife to his flesh. He did not scream. His body arched, a silent, terrible convulsion of pure agony. A low, animal sound was torn from his throat, but he was unconscious. He was somewhere far away. She cut. The smell was something she would never forget. She forced her shaking hand to be steady. She had to get it. She dug, following the path of the lead, the knife slipping on the blood. She was sobbing, the tears blurring her vision. But she did not stop. She felt the hard, flattened metal. She worked the knife under it, prying it, twisting. It came free, a small, ugly piece of lead. She flung it away. He was bleeding, a fresh, hot gush. She pressed her hands to the wound, trying to stop it. She needed the poultice. She ran. She left him, bleeding, by the fire. She ran across the mesa, her eyes scanning the rock, the cracks. What plants? What leaves? She saw a low, green plant, the one he had pointed out, the one he had said was a Z, medicine. She ripped it from the ground. She found another, a broad, fuzzy leaf. She grabbed everything she recognized. She ran back. She fell to her knees. She stuffed the leaves into her mouth, her own mouth, and chewed. The taste was bitter, acrid, like poison. She chewed until it was a wet, green paste. She spat it, a messy, ugly wad, directly into the open, cauterized wound. She packed it in, her fingers deep in his flesh. He groaned, a long, low sound. He was still alive. She tore the last of her skirt, the final remnant of her Philadelphia life, into long strips. She bound his chest, tightly, wrapping the cloth around and around, making a thick, desperate bandage. She had done it. She did not know if she had killed him or saved him. She half dragged, half rolled his unconscious body a few yards, into a shallow depression in the rock, a place with a small overhang that offered a sliver of shade. She collapsed beside him, her body finally surrendering to the exhaustion, the shock, the terror. She laid her head on his chest, on the clean part of his shirt, and listened to the faint, faint beat of his heart. He burned for 3 days. He was in a world of ghosts. He thrashed, his good arm flailing. He spoke, not in English, but in the low, flowing sounds of his own tongue. He called out names she did not know. Anai, Shinai. He called for Hashke. He called for his first wife. His body was a furnace. Alice did not leave him. She found the small spring he had spoken of, a place where water wept from the rock. She had nothing to carry it in. She used her boot. She soaked a piece of cloth in the foul-tasting, leather-tainted water and moistened his cracked lips. She bathed his face. She held him when he shook. She was the hunter. She took his knife. She found the snares he carried, thin loops of sinew. She remembered what he had shown her. She set them, her fingers clumsy. She sat for hours, waiting. She caught a rabbit, a small, thin creature. She killed it with a rock, her eyes closed, vomiting afterward. But she skinned it with his knife, as she had seen him do. She ate the meat raw, in the dark of their small shelter, because she did not dare light a fire again. She was becoming a creature of the rock. Her skin was burned dark. Her hair was a matted, wild thing. Her hands were caked with his blood and the rabbit's. She was no longer Alice Harrison. She was the woman of the mesa. On the 4th morning, the fever broke. His skin was cool. He was slick with sweat. He was pale as death. But he was breathing. He was breathing. She was curled beside him, sleeping, her hand on his chest. His eyes opened. He did not know where he was. He saw the blue, empty sky. He felt the stone at his back. He felt the fire in his side. He turned his head. He saw her. She was a ruin. She was gaunt, her face all cheekbones and wide, sunken eyes. Her lips were black and cracked. She was asleep. He saw the blood on her hands, the knife in her belt. He saw the empty, skinned carcass of the rabbit. He saw the strips of her dress, bound around his chest. He understood. He touched her face. His hand was weak. She woke instantly, like an animal. Her eyes flew open. She saw him. She saw his eyes, clear and sane. She didn't cry. She did not smile. She just let out a long, shuddering breath, a sound of a burden finally set down. "Jacob," she whispered. He said her name, Alice. His recovery was a slow, painful crawl back to life. He was weak. The warrior of stone was as fragile as a child. The wound in his side ached, but it was not poisoned. It was healing. She had saved him. The power had shifted. He was the teacher, but she was the strength. She was the body. He was the mind. He taught her which roots were good, which ones held water. He taught her how to chip a new edge on the knife. She did the work. She hunted. She foraged. She hauled the water. She fed him. Small bites of roasted lizard, of tough, dry roots. He watched her. He watched her move. Her body now lean and hard. Her grace no longer that of a ballroom, but of a hawk. He saw her hands, scarred and strong. He had fallen in love with a woman of iron will. He woke up to find she was a woman of iron strength. As he healed, they talked. The silence was gone. In the safety of their high, empty world, they spoke. She told him of Philadelphia, of the velvet cage, of her cold father. He told her of his first wife, of her laugh, of the coughing sickness that had taken her. He told her of his son, a small boy he had held for only one winter. He spoke of his anger, the cold thing that had driven him. "It is gone," he said one evening, the fire between them. "When I saw you, when you pulled me up the rock, the anger, it felt stupid. It felt heavy. I let it go." "I am glad," she said, her hand finding his. "It was killing you." You are my people now," he said, holding her hand. "You are my Dine." They found a true cave, a deep, dry hollow in the rock, a place where people had lived long ago. There were faint paintings on the wall, ghosts of hands. They made it a home. He was strong enough to walk. He began to hunt again. She made pots from the creek clay, clumsy and thick, but they held water. They built a life. It was hard. It was simple. It was, for a long, quiet month, perfect. They were the only two people in the world. But the world had not forgotten them. He was on the edge of the mesa, his eyes scanning the world below. He had his rifle. He was teaching her to shoot, but she was a poor student. She hated the noise, the kick. He saw them. A flicker of movement. Not the blue of soldiers. This was the brown and gray of the desert. 4 riders. They were not a patrol. They were a hunting party. They were spread out, moving slowly, scanning the canyons, the washes. They had a pack horse. They were not here for a day. They were here for as a hunt. Bounty hunters. Drawn by the $500. Drawn by the story of the murdered prospectors and the kidnapped white woman. They were not soldiers. They had no rules. They would not stop. He watched them all day. They made a cold camp in a deep wash, the one he and Alice had fled through. They were smart. They were patient. He went back to the cave. Alice was grinding corn. The sound was a rhythm, the sound of their home. She had found a patch of wild maize, a miracle, and harvested it. She saw his face. She stopped. "What is it?" "They are here." She did not ask who. She knew. "Soldiers. Worse, men who hunt for money. 4 of them. They are in the wash. Below us." Alice stood up. She wiped her dusty hands on her deerskin leggings. He had made them for her, to replace the last of her dress. She did not panic. She did not cry. She looked at him, her gaze as steady as his. "They will not find us. This place is hidden." "They are patient," he said. "They will wait. They will search. They will not leave until they have us, or until the snow comes." She looked at the rifle, leaning against the cave wall, the one she had taken. "Then they will not leave." He went to her. He put his hands on her shoulders. He looked at her. She was no longer a victim, a runaway. She was a partner. "We cannot run," he said. "This is our home. We cannot let them take this, too." "Then we fight," she said, her voice low. "I will not go back. I will not let them take you." He looked at her, at this woman he had found, this woman who had saved him, this woman who had remade him. His war had been for the dead. Now, he had to fight for the living. He had to fight for her. "We fight," he said, "but not like them. We fight like the people. We are the shadows. We are the rock, and this is our land." They did not wait for morning. The night was their ally. The 4 men in the wash below had a fire, a small, arrogant dot of light in the vast darkness. They believed they were the hunters. They did not know they were the prey. Jacob was a different man from the one who had attacked the soldiers. The fire in his side had burned away the last of his cold rage. He was not fighting for his past, for his ghosts. He was fighting for his future, for the woman who sat beside him, her hand steady on his arm. He spoke, his voice a low whisper against the stone. "They have 4 horses. They have water for 3, maybe 4 days. They have food. We take the horses, or we take the water. We leave them the food. We leave them their lives. The land will teach them the lesson." Alice nodded. She understood. This was not a war of killing. It was a war of living. "I can make a sound," she whispered, from the far end of the wash. A rockfall. He looked at her. Her eyes were sharp in the dark. He nodded. "Give me time to get to the horses. When you hear the cry of the nighthawk 3 times, they will be looking away. Then you make the noise. Make it loud." He kissed her, a hard, quick press of his lips. "You are my heart. Be a shadow." "You too," she whispered. He was gone. He did not make a sound. He slipped over the edge of the mesa, using the same chimney they had climbed. He was a part of the rock. Alice was left alone, on the high ledge, overlooking the camp. She was not afraid. She was a sentry. She was a warrior. She waited. The fire below was a small comfort to the men there. She could hear the low murmur of their voices, the stamp of a horse. An hour passed. Her body was stiff, but she did not move. Then she heard it, from the darkness, near the picket line of the horses, a high, sharp cry. Cree-ee! A pause. Cree-ee! A final. Long cree-ee! The men by the fire stood up. One of them, a big man with a long rifle, said, "What in tarnation was that?" "Just a bird," another said. "That ain't no bird I ever heard. Sounded like it was over by the horses. Go check. Sam." Two of them moved, walking slowly, rifles ready, toward the horses. They were looking away from her, away from the far end of the wash. Now, Alice put her shoulder to a large, precariously balanced boulder at the edge of the cliff. It was a rock she had marked days ago. She pushed. It did not move. She set her feet, using the strength in her legs, the strength she had earned. She pushed again, a low groan in her throat. The rock teetered, and then it fell. It was a terrible sound. It fell for a long second, then hit the side of the canyon wall, exploding into a dozen smaller rocks. The avalanche of stone and gravel thundered into the far end of the wash. The sound echoed, like a cannon shot, like the end of the world. The men by the fire yelled. The two men by the horses spun around, firing their rifles at the noise. "Ambush!" one of them screamed. "They are up there!" They all ran toward the sound, toward the rockfall, crouching behind boulders. Their rifles pointed at the empty cliff face where she had been. She did not stay to watch. She was already moving, running, silent on her moccasins, back to the chimney, back to the cave. He was not there. She waited. Her heart was a drum. The shouting below continued. Then it changed. It was no longer the sound of a fight. It was the sound of pure, helpless rage. He appeared at the mouth of the cave. He was not even breathing hard. He was carrying 2 large water skins. He was smiling. "They are unhappy," he said. "The horses?" she asked. "They are running free, 5 miles south of here. The men are shooting at shadows, and," he held up the water skins, "they are now very thirsty." They sat in the dark of their cave and listened. The men yelled for an hour. They fired at rocks. They cursed. Then, the silence of defeat. When the sun rose, Jacob and Alice lay on the rim of the mesa, hidden, and watched. The 4 men were arguing. They were packing their supplies, their food, but they had no water. They had no horses. They looked up at the high, impossible walls of the mesa. They saw nothing. They were beaten. One of them shook his fist at the empty rocks. Then they began to walk. It was a long, hot, thirsty walk back to the settlement. They would live, but they would not come back. Jacob watched them until they were small dots in the vast, shimmering heat. The threat was over, but the peace was broken. He turned to Alice. "They will tell the story. More will come. Not for the money, but for the pride. This is not a home. It is a memory. It is the place you saved my life." "It is our home," she said, her voice quiet. "It was." He touched her face. "Our home is not a place. Alice, it is us. We must go." "Where?" she asked. It was not a question of fear. It was a question of logistics. "My people, my old people, had stories of a land to the north, beyond the dry mountains, a place of green grass, a place where the rivers do not die in the summer, a place the soldiers have not found, a place to build." She nodded. "I will get the corn." They left the mesa 2 days later. They carried what they had: the rifle, the knife, 2 water skins, and a small deerskin bag of precious, hard-won corn. They left the cave, the faint handprints on the wall, the grinding stones. They walked away from the high, red world that had been their crucible. They walked for a moon. They crossed the high desert, a land of pale sand and gray brush. They avoided the trails, the forts, the new iron lines of the railroad. They were two ghosts, moving through a land that no longer wanted them. But they were not fleeing. They were journeying. He taught her the names of the stars, the ones his people used to navigate. She taught him the words of a poem she remembered, about a love that was not a love of sight, but of the mind. He hunted. She made their camp. They were a single unit, two halves of a whole. She was no longer a Harrison of Philadelphia. He was no longer a warrior of the Deneta. They were just Jacob and Alice. And then the land changed. The red rock and the gray sand gave way to rolling hills, then to dark forests of pine. They climbed. The air grew thin and cold. They crossed a high pass, the snow still deep in the shadows, and looked down. It was there, a valley, a long, wide, secret valley, held in the arms of the mountains. A river, full and clean, ran through the center, and the grass, it was green, a deep, impossible green. They walked down into the valley. It was empty. There were no soldiers, no miners, no bounty hunters. There were only deer and elk and the cry of eagles. They found a place on a small rise above the river, sheltered by a stand of tall aspen trees. "Here," Jacob said. "Here we build." The story ends not with a sound, but with a silence. A summer afternoon, 2 years later. The house is built. It is not a hogan. It is not a fine Philadelphia house. It is a cabin, built of logs he cut, chinked with mud she mixed. It is solid. It is real. Alice is in the garden. She is wearing deerskin, her hair braided. Her hands are in the earth. She is planting. The corn is tall, a miracle of green stalks. She is planting beans and squash, the seeds of the people, the seeds of their future. Jacob is by the river. He is not watching the horizon. He is mending a fishing net. His rifle leans against a tree, but it is for hunting, not for war. The scar on his arm is a pale, faded line. It no longer itches. He stops. He looks at her. He watches her move, her body strong, her face calm. She is part of this. She is part of the earth, the water, the sun. She is no longer a prisoner of anything. She is, he thinks, the freest person he has ever known. She looks up, as if feeling his gaze. She smiles. It is not the witty, fragile smile of the woman he found in the ravine. It is a smile of deep, quiet, certain peace. He walks to her. He stands beside her, his hand on her back. They do not need to speak. They look out at their valley, at the green prairie, the flowing river, the high protective mountains. He had lost his world. She had run from hers. He had been a man of anger, living for the dead. She had been a woman of fear, trapped by the living. Now, he was a man of peace. He had found his home, not in the land of his ancestors, but in the heart of this woman. He had learned that true freedom was not the right to fight. It was the right to build. It was the right to love. And he knew, as he put his arm around her, that love and freedom were not two different things. They were the same thing. They were, at last, one. Thank you for listening to our story. We would love to hear where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below so we can all connect. Do not forget to subscribe to Wild West Tales, like this video, and give it a big boost by hitting the hype button to help this story reach even more people.